Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is June 25th, 2015. And tonight we're going to be talking about monetary policy stimulus versus fiscal policy stimulus. Before we get started, if you like these nightly live streams and the rest of the Smaulgld channel and the Smaulgld website, you can support Smaulgld via Patreon, becoming a Smaulgld patron, or by donating via PayPal, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, all at the links below this BitChute, this live stream, this YouTube, and on the Smaulgld website. And if you can't donate, consider bringing a friend along or consider doing both. Now, let's talk about what happened today before we get into our topic. Everything was down across the board: gold, silver, platinum, palladium, NASDAQ, Dow Jones, FTSE, DAX, all global stocks down, all commodities down. At one point, the Dow Jones was down more than 2%, NASDAQ closed over 2% down, S&P closed about 1.37% down. Big losses. The only thing that was up during the day was Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and a host of other cryptocurrencies. That's one of the few times I've seen this diversion or this difference between, doesn't seem to be any correlation as to when Bitcoin, Litecoin, or the cryptocurrencies move up or down. They seem to move up on their own whenever they feel like it, although today was interesting. Everything was down and the cryptocurrencies were up. I wouldn't read much into that. That's just one day. It doesn't mean cryptocurrencies are destined to skyrocket as the stock market falls. I get carried away, but that is what happened today, and I'm happy to report that. Now, monetary policy versus fiscal policy. The reason we're going to talk about that today is I had a question from a subscriber and also discussion offline about credit cycles. I'm going to bring the two together. So the question that Scott raised last night, or actually raised underneath one of the videos, he said, near the close, you point out the wisdom of listening to the Fed closely and doing what you want even though you hate them. And that's my point of view, is they said they wanted the create a wealth effect, and that wealth effect they wanted to be created in rising stock prices and rising home prices. Clearly what they wanted to do, and they did that through monetary policy. So Scott asked, you mentioned Bernanke and Yellen and the wealth effect they wanted to create in stocks and real estate, i.e. get consumer debt slaves spending again. Then he asked, what do you hear when you listen to the supposedly more hawkish Fed? What I hear when I listen to the more hawkish Powell, and the fact that he has been instituting rate hikes and he's saying they're going to institute more rate hikes, I think what I hear is he is saying monetary policy has done its job. It's now time for fiscal policy to take over. Before we get further into that analysis, let's define. Now, if you don't know the difference between monetary and fiscal policy, you're in good company. JFK himself, the president, was notorious for not knowing the difference, or at least feigning ignorance of the difference. Whenever he had cabinet meetings and they said we need to discuss monetary and fiscal policy at this meeting, he'd say, "Oh, remind me of the difference." And the difference is monetary policy is what is the macro policy of the country. It's usually by the central bank, and it's the idea of controlling the money supply, setting interest rates, and basically managing to a rate of inflation, very macro level. Fiscal policy, on the other hand, is basically what the Congress does, or whatever the entity is in the country that's in charge of the purse strings. Excuse me. It's your taxing and spending. Now, monetary policy clearly has driven the U.S. economy for the past 8 years. There's been very little change in the fiscal policy, other than just extending the budget deadlines, raising the debt ceiling. but really no major changes in fiscal policy other than just continue spending. No real changes. The monetary policy, on the other hand, has been very aggressive, or what you would call accommodative or loose monetary policy. Now, loose monetary policy means that you have low interest rates, you have an increased money supply, you make it easier for people to borrow money because the interest rates are lower. And then if you have to, you can do that by setting interest rates. You can also do it by actually going into the market, creating your currency and buying assets with it, like the Fed did when they bought U.S. Treasuries and when they bought mortgage-backed securities. So they're basically looking to loosen up the monetary policy to make it easier for people to invest. Now, what fiscal policy does, an accommodative fiscal policy, they don't use the term, but if you were to use the analog, would be to cut taxes, because this would allow more people to have more money because they pay less in taxes. A restrictive or austere fiscal policy would be raise taxes and slash benefits. Remember, it's taxing and spending. Now, who benefits from a accommodative monetary policy? Well, those with assets, obviously, and those with the means to invest. Because if you lower interest rates, you make it easier to invest, you make it easier to buy houses, you make it easier to get stock market gains because the money will flow into stocks and out of fixed income items because the interest rates are low. So people with assets or the means to purchase assets will benefit from an accommodative monetary policy. Now, who benefits from a loose fiscal policy where they lower taxes and let's say they don't cut benefits? Well, the rich benefit no matter what. They'll benefit from accommodative monetary policy and they'll benefit from tax cuts. Why? They pay the most taxes, so if you have a fiscal policy that's going to cut taxes, they're going to benefit. However, a fiscal policy, tax and spend policy that is favorable in that it cuts taxes but doesn't cut benefits, that more directly favors also the poor and the middle class. Why? Because unlike monetary policy where they don't have the means to benefit from the low interest rates, they don't own assets already and they're not going to go out and buy assets because they don't have the disposable income, monetary policy doesn't help the middle class or the poor very much. Fiscal policy, however, if it's done to help the middle class and the poor, can help both the poor, the middle class, and the rich by cutting taxes. What fiscal policy can also do, though, is, remember, it's not just taxes, it's also spending. Fiscal policy can be tight in the sense that it can become austere in that it may raise taxes and also cut government programs. Now, that's unpopular with the large segments of the population who receive those benefits. Now, in Europe, they have an issue that the United States doesn't have. Their monetary policy is set by a European central bank, and their fiscal policies are set by the countries, but they are directed by the EU, meaning a country cannot do whatever it wants in its fiscal policy. For example, Italy can't decide, we're going to lower taxes, or we're going to keep all the benefits the same. Or we're going to increase the benefits, and we're going to print lira and inflate our way out of our problem. So the individual countries in Europe are limited in the fiscal policies they can enact, but the European Central Bank's monetary policy can do whatever it wants. And generally, in the last 10 years, the central bank's policies have been very accommodative, meaning their monetary policies have gravitated towards low or no or negative interest rates, and also they've gravitated towards stimulus. So it's monetary stimulus. Now, fiscal stimulus, as we mentioned, is the Congress or the spending authority lowering taxes. Also, a part of fiscal policy could be regulations, depending on how they fit it into the budget, whether to cut spending on regulations would be a form of fiscal policy, even though it's indirect, because what they're doing is they're cutting spending. But the cutting of spending on regulation could have a stimulative impact on the economy, just as tax cuts could have a stimulative impact on the economy, and also not lowering benefits could also have a neutral to stimulative benefit in the economy. Because if people are on benefits and they continue to get them, that means the monies that they receive, they will continue to put back into the economy at the rate at which they receive. There should be no change absent something odd happening. But in addition, if you have that and you have tax cuts, then there's even more money that'll flow into the economy, because people will have more money to spend from top to bottom if the tax cuts are indeed somewhat synchronous, meaning that the rich, the poor, the middle class, everyone gets a tax cut. That means that everyone has more money, and the more money people have, they have more money to invest, they have more money to save, and they have more money to spend. Now, the reason I mention this is that it was a very good question by Scott. What he was saying is, what happens now? And my thought is, and I'd like to hear what you guys think as to what's going to happen. Everyone focuses on monetary policy because that's what we know. And I have another quote up here from Single Cell Organism. He was saying, the problem with the '08 gold rush, in my estimation, is the loss of the vision that the real economy and not just apocalyptic economies happen. This has been a theme over the last few days that we've been talking about, is that everyone is focused on collapse, apocalypse, credit freezing, and all that is based on monetary policy failures. When you have the Federal Reserve, when you have the ECB, whatever central bank it is, making missteps, raising rates too fast, cutting them too much, introducing too much stimulus, whatever it is, that's what creates a problem and has created a problem. So the other thing that got me onto this topic was another subscriber was mentioning, he was contradicting my hypothetical that we could have an economic boom. And he was saying you generally don't have that economic boom because credit cycles dictate how the economy works. That's the overall monetary policy. So for example, generally, when you have rising interest rates, you can have an economy growing into rising interest rates. And the reason the economy is growing into rising interest rates was because it was growing as a result of falling interest rates, and it hasn't had time to turn around to absorb the rising interest rates. And this gentleman's point of view was, at some point in a rising interest rate environment, the monetary policy people oftentimes just raise rates a little too high, and then they hit the economy and it goes back down. That's very typical. You can look at the charts, of how the monetary policies, you could see on the credit cycle, how the markets do, how the economies do, and they generally, at some point, they ramp up as rates go down or stay down, and then they slow down. And that's the purpose of raising rates, is to cool off a overheating economy, and the purpose of driving rates down is to stimulate the economy. And again, that's all at the macro level. That's not going to give you, me, or anyone else any extra money. It's going to create an environment to create this wealth effect. But as we just mentioned above, that type of policy is geared and directed towards the top. It only really lower interest rates really benefit the rich who can afford assets, who already have assets. You can claim there's some trickle down, yes. You can't buy a home, you don't make that much money, but the rates come down, you might be able to squeeze one in. But generally, it's not a direct benefit to as many people as a stimulative fiscal policy is. So when Scott Wordle asks the question, where do we see things going here at Smaulgld, we meaning me, I see now the Fed stepping back on monetary policy, saying we can absorb this, we've reached escape velocity, as it were, and therefore it's time for, looks like, fiscal policy to take over. And we really haven't had fiscal policy take over the overall macro management of the economy. Ever since Reagan's tax cuts, there really hasn't been any since. So these tax cuts, in my belief, are going to have a stimulative effect, provided that the Fed doesn't, according to my other subscriber, push the rates too far in the cycle. And I don't think that they'll do that because the Fed is already at 1.75% interest rates. And having rates that high gives them a big cushion above the other central banks. So I think they might get them to 2, 2.25, 2.5. And at that point, the tax cuts will be fully implemented. They already are. We'll be getting the salubrious effect from them. And then we might even get, within 2-3 years, the beginning of a rate cycle cut. While the other central banks that have been at zero or negative, start raising their rates, the Fed, I believe, will start hinting or even cutting the rates by 1/4 point down from 2.5, 2.25, down a bit. So at that point, you might get the benefits of a growing economy based on the fiscal stimulus, meaning the tax cuts and the cuts in regulation, and then also get a further boost from a Fed that is switching from being tight or hawkish to being either neutral or moving back down the interest rate cycle. All right, so I think that is up for debate what will happen, but the reason, again, it's important is it ties into the other hypothetical that we could be on the verge of a economic boomlet, and we also could be on the verge of having a debt collapse, which would wipe out any boomlet we might have, and that could be brought about by a number of things. One of them could be the Fed continues just to raise rates, oblivious to what's going on. The other could be we find out something is wrong in the economy that we weren't aware of. The other thing, there's many things that could happen to derail the economy. The whole point of the exercise wasn't to predict an economic boom, was to point out that if an economic boom were to happen, it might be good for gold and silver, and that a wealthy society can afford to buy gold and silver and often likes to adorn themselves and other things with gold to show off their riches. Also, if we were to have an economic boom, the issues that we have wouldn't go away. That's what a lot of people are pointing out. Yeah, but wait a minute, what about 21 trillion in debt? And what about 180 trillion unfunded liabilities? Yeah, they're still there. But we've had, and China's had, an economic boom against the backdrop of its own Ponzi scheme. So during a Ponzi scheme, things can go really well. I mean, what about the guy who should be synonymous with Ponzi scheme, the Madoff scheme? People were doing really well for a long time under him. So I wasn't using that example that we were going to have some type of sustainable Goldilocks growth. I was saying it's possible, and I still believe it's possible, that we could have an economic boom despite having an overhang of debt and a lot of other issues, and that also during that period we could see the price of gold and silver rising. All right, so let's take a look now at some of the questions that we have. Silver Wolverine says Mr. GLD. Is that a takeoff on the name Smaulgld? I'm not sure. Unscammable. Now, Unscammable has agreed to be a guest on the program. I haven't yet responded to your question on how to use the Skype, but I'll do that when we get off here. He has a very easy way of distinguishing between monetary and fiscal policies. I describe monetary policies as what the Fed does and conducting macroeconomic policies, and that the fiscal policies were what the spending authority does, which is the Congress in forms of taxing and spending. And I mentioned that monetary policy generally helps those with assets, those with means, and that fiscal policy, if it's done correctly, could basically help. If there's tax cuts and not spending cuts, could help those that are both wealthy, poor, and in the middle class. So Unscammable has taken the last 3 minutes of my explanation and put it into 4 words. Monetary policy. Monetary policy equals Wall Street. That means it helps the wealthy. And fiscal policy equals Main Street. And that's a very good way of looking at it. And thanks for that explanation, because fiscal policy right now is what's driving the U.S. economy. The Trump tax cuts are providing a stimulus that more people will see. Now, if you think about the direct impact of the Trump tax cuts, people were actually receiving $1,000 checks from their employer as a direct result of their employer getting the benefits of fiscal policy. Now, under monetary policy, they could take rates down to negative. They could do $10 trillion worth of QE, and you wouldn't see a dime. The person on mainstream wouldn't see a dime, but Wall Street would see a huge fortune, and that's what happened. We had 7-8 years of QE, 7-8 years of negative or zero interest rates in the United States, negative elsewhere. And what happened? Asset prices on Wall Street rose, doubled and tripled in value over the course of that time period, whereas wages remained stagnant. So you could see how Wall Street benefited from the monetary policy, but Main Street did not. Now the reverse is happening. Not necessarily, as I mentioned, the wealthy don't really get harmed either way, but fiscal policy that is geared towards helping the economy through tax cuts benefits those that are poor, those that are middle class, and those that are rich. And obviously the rich do get the bulk of the tax cuts, but everyone gets that, whereas in monetary policy, the benefits of an accommodative monetary policy only go towards the wealthy. Now, let's get to some more comments here. John Batalu. Sounds like central banks are colluding on a slow play to drain away supplies of PMs from the third world. Thoughts? In general, what we've seen over the past 15 years are Western central banks not adding any gold to their reserves, and Eastern central banks adding gold to theirs. So you've seen the rise in the People's Bank of China announcing their gold holdings sometime in 2000 and maybe it was even 19. They first announced them in the early 2000s, then they didn't announce them again until 2009, and then they didn't announce them again until 2015. But during that time period, it was clear that they had accumulated at least what they were willing to admit and what the central bank actually claims to have on its balance sheet, about 1,800 tons. That's a first. That's one of the few Eastern central banks that are in the top 10, because remember, the gold in the world was originally almost all in the United States, especially after World War II, when we took not just the United States gold holdings and the gold that it had confiscated in 1933 from its citizens and then had recast and dumped into Fort Knox in 1937. We also had, before World War II and continued after World War II, the large Western countries sending their gold for safekeeping into the United States, and that included France, Italy, Germany, England. Now, Germany, France, and Italy today are the largest gold holders after the United States, and they at one point had all their gold in the United States. Great Britain was once a large gold holder, and they had some of their gold at the United States. And you follow on from there, there were no countries in the East in the top 10. You had the Netherlands, you had Switzerland, and now you have in the 5th and 6th places, you have Russia, and you have China, and you now have Kazakhstan in the top 20, you have Turkey in the top 10, India. Now, India is not the central bank or the Reserve Bank of India is at 557 tons, which is not that much, but it makes it enough for being 11th in the world. But the Indian people have, and the temples have about 22,000 tons of gold. So there's a movement of gold from west to east. But what John is asking is, central banks are colluding on a slow pay to drain away the supplies from the third world. Well, I guess there you're talking about, I don't know if that's central banks or that's just imperialism. Clearly, Venezuela lost its gold. It repatriated its gold. Then I think that's their own incompetence. I don't think the central banks put a number on. The central banks control Argentina, that's for sure. They're always bailing them out. But Venezuela, I think, did it to itself. So it had to sell a lot of its gold, more than half of it, in the most recent crisis that they've had. There are other countries where they go in, I think maybe in Iraq or wherever they have problems, they may go in and they may loot the gold. But I don't know if that's central banks doing that or if that's just the country that goes in and takes control of the country. That's just part of taking the loot. So I don't know if they're taking from the third world, because most of the world's gold is in the West. It's not in the third world. However, a lot of the world's gold reserves are in the third world. And China is making a big play, as are the multinational companies, many of them Canadian, some of them U.S. The large gold miners are all over the third world. Some of your biggest gold mining countries outside of Australia, which you could consider a Western country, are located. Well, number one is China, number two is Russia, three is Australia, and then there's a lot of gold mining now in Kazakhstan, places in Africa, places in Asia. Precious little gold mining. There's a little bit of gold mining now going on in Ireland, a few other places, but the third world really has the gold reserves, South Africa, but not so much the gold holdings. Woo-ho, thanks for keeping it real, Lou. Otherwise, I might have jumped on the gold silver bug in one swoop instead of accumulating over time. Yeah, when they try to tell you this next thing, see, one of the things they teach you in sales, you have to create urgency. They can't tell you it's a good idea, you got to buy it, yeah, when you get around to it. No, there's two things. They need their commission. They got to keep getting the commission. So they got to get the subscribers to keep subscribing. They got to get new subscribers. So they got to create the urgency. Sovereign size gold buying 45 days. In 2 months, there's going to be a gold back yuan. COMEX is in an imminent default. Get yours now. The credit's going to freeze. Deutsche Bank's going to implode. You got to get it now. They don't tell you, like, accumulate slowly. Rationally, they lose. If they have to talk rationality, they're not going to get the sale. They're not going to get the subscriber. They're not going to get the people to continue to subscribe. And once you're addicted to hearing these stories, you'll believe anything. You'll believe when they recycle the story, even though they threatened they do that story 4 or 5 times in the past. Running out of silver. There's no gold in the COMEX defaults. This commitment of traders has never happened before. It's all guaranteed to send gold and silver skyrocketing, and you better buy now. By the way, we're having a special on silver. That's what they do. And that's the thing that I've noticed, because, well, as I mentioned the other night, back in 2013 when I started this channel, when I saw these things not happening, I asked why. And what I realized is people have short attention spans. They don't remember they were told a story about gold-backed yuan or COMEX default or commitment of traders never happened before. We're going to run out of silver, or the dollar collapses in 2015. Deutsche Bank's been imminently collapsing for 10 years. COMEX has been defaulting for 20 years. But you'll see all these things. Yeah, one day you might see. But the point is, it's not crying wolf. They keep telling you these stories, and they don't just tell you, these are the things that are out there. Think about it. Consider it. Maybe you want to. No. You got to get it now, because you're going to wake up one morning, and you're better off being, 17 years early than a minute too late, which means you better buy it now. All right. And it's smart to do anything in reasoned steps, Wuho. I mean, you can't go wrong averaging into something unless you're buying the worst possible asset. But only a fool, as they say, fools rush in. You buy everything at once because you heard some story. That's it. It's over. It's over. Game over. The end game is going to be here in a month, and no one else knows this other than me, because I watched a YouTube with the interview with somebody who's been saying the same thing for 10 years. So I went out and I put all my money, I sold my house, and I put all my money in whatever they're selling. Unscammable. Which country has the most PMs? I don't think that data. No, you can only go by what. Let me read the whole thing. What country has the most PMs? I don't think that data is realistically available. Most of what we know, we have no idea. That's a fact. Well, I love when people insist the United States has no gold. You don't know that. You have no idea whether they have it or they don't have it. But you've been told they don't have it because it makes for a good story. It makes for the dollar collapse. And then you believe that China has whatever they say they have. In fact, you believe that they have even more. You don't know that. You don't know anything. Well, there are certain things we can claim to know. There are numbers that people report. There are import-export numbers that go into China. The Shanghai Gold Exchange numbers. Who knows if those numbers are real? Who knows if any of the numbers are real? They're probably directionally correct. But the idea that Germany has 3,346 tons, prove that. Actually, you might be able to through an audit, but who knows? You really don't know. So you have to go by what most people think is there. And generally, that becomes the reality. If everyone believes the United States has 8,133.50 tons, then they probably do. I mean, it doesn't matter whether they do or not. That's what people believe. It's the same with, it doesn't do you any good to know better unless you actually know the United States doesn't have the, no, I don't mean no because you listen to someone on YouTube screaming and yelling that they don't have it. Unless you actually know it, that's when you can make a killing, because when it becomes common knowledge that what you know in advance becomes common knowledge, then you are going to be sitting pretty. And that's what a lot of pumpers do. They pretend to give you knowledge that they don't even have, but they figure if you think it's good knowledge and you think it's kind of inside and no one else knows this, and the COMEX is going to default in the next week, wow, what's the first thing you should go out and do? You got this inside knowledge, buy gold. If you know that there's no gold in Fort Knox, because I know, I don't know how they know this, well, then you go out and you buy gold. But you're right, Unscammable, we really don't know. We really do not know what's going on, who's got what. But the reason I report, people say, why do you report on those lies? I'm like, how do you even know they're lies? You only say they're lies because you've listened to people on YouTube tell you that they're not real. I have no way of knowing whether they're real or not. I didn't see the gold. I didn't count the gold. So when I report Russia added this much gold to the reserves, I say the central bank or the Federation of Russia reported they have this much gold. I don't know that they have it. Oh, but we saw pictures and the Russians have it. The United States doesn't have it. How do you know that? Well, Yunkin was standing there with one bar. You know, in court, they throw you out if you make those types of arguments. So he's standing there with one bar. What does that mean? Well, it means, and then they just extrapolate, that there wasn't any gold for him to stand in front of, so he only showed one bar. There could be countless other explanations why he was standing with one bar. That doesn't mean anything. That is what they did with Bitcoin all this week. Database, DNA, boom, boom, boom. My reviewer says Bitcoin to hit 100K by the end of 2018. Absolutely. Game changer. Bitcoin's going to end central banking. Everyone's going to be using Bitcoin. The thing about Bitcoin, however, as we have seen, it's not as foolish, although it is foolish, to make ridiculous predictions about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a far tinier market. It's far more volatile, far easier to manipulate. And there really are only, not even 21 million, because probably 5 million, 6 million are lost. It doesn't take much to move that mark. It can go to zero, but it could go to 100,000. I remember when it was a few thousand. I think I was on Wall Street for Main Street. And they said, what do you think you do? I said, you can go to 10,000. I was like, wow, why do you say that? Because why couldn't it? Why wouldn't it? It went to 20,000. This one was a few $1,000. Because once it gets going, it just gets going. It's like a mania. You really don't have the way gold is set up. The markets of gold and silver, they have on the COMEX, they have breakers, so it can't go up 20% in a day. They stop it. You can see they have them officially, and you see them have them officially. You ever notice on Brexit, you see the thing go up and then it just flatlines. It just stops going up. You're like, well, that can't be. But they control it that way. They have less control over Bitcoin because it doesn't get its price from one place, like the COMEX. It gets it on a zillion different exchanges. And again, it's a much smaller market, so it can go higher. Fort Knox is a game changer. It's game over, Pad. They're lying about how much gold they have. That story is also considered fact. A lot of people tell me, like they know something. Oh, the United States doesn't have any gold. They don't have any gold. That's only because they've heard that 1,000 times on YouTube. They don't know that. They just like to repeat that story. China's going to do this. China's going to do that. Because the people that tell you those stories, they met with the Chinese officials. No, they read a quote from Sun Tzu. They think they understand what China's doing. De-dollarization. They've had it. The BRICS have had it. All right. DW. Would there be any advantage to the U.S. if they did an audit of the gold in Fort Knox? The one thing that does raise the speculation about Fort Knox is they haven't had an audit since the 50s, a real full audit. And you say, well, why not? Well, they try to say it's too expensive. There's no reason. Because no one really cares, other than people that are on the gold bug channels. Like, the world is not concerned whether the United States has its gold or not. The only time the world was really concerned whether the U.S. had the gold or not was under the Bretton Woods Agreement. Because under the Bretton Woods Agreement, foreign central banks could bring their dollars to the U.S. treasuries and get gold. And they were concerned, and so was the United States, that if that continued, they'd run out of gold. Ever since Bretton Woods, it's become less important whether the U.S. has gold or not. And as we know, the way they got out of that kept the dollar going was they entered into the petrodollar arrangements, whereby you needed dollars, not because they were backed by gold, but because you needed them to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, and because Saudi Arabia was the world's largest oil exporter, and you needed dollars to buy it because Saudi Arabia had agreed with the U.S. that they were only going to price their oil in dollars and only sell it in dollars. Now, the reason that the dollar is less reliant on the petrodollar, but again, they continue to tout this story end of the petrodollar, possibly, but the petrodollar is less important because foreign central banks hold dollars in reserve far in excess of their need to buy oil. I think oil is only 8 to 12% of international trade. There's other things going on. And also, if you need the dollar to be backed by oil, the United States will soon be a larger oil exporter than Saudi Arabia. They're already a larger producer, and when they're a larger exporter, you're going to need dollars to buy oil from the United States. So the petrodollar can be backed by U.S. oil and Saudi oil because they haven't agreed to ditch the dollar either. All right, would there be any? So, I'm sorry. Would there be any advantage to whom? If no one cares that the United States has gold or doesn't have gold, what difference does it make? I actually wrote a long piece when I was doing my manipulation studies. I mentioned it wasn't those two articles. It was the article called The Importance of Gold to Nations. You never hear the United States, the Fed, president, ever mention gold. You hear the Chinese, you hear the Russians, they talk about the gold reserves. And the question is, they're clearly trying to de-emphasize, unless they're asked by like Ron Paul. The central banks, they never mention it's not included. And is it a question of when you have it, you don't flaunt it and you don't say anything, or you don't want anyone to know you don't have it? I think it doesn't matter either way, because by not talking about it, by not having the audit, the only people that care are people on YouTube. It's not widespread. The man in the street doesn't think about whether there's gold in Fort Knox and what the implication. When I hear somebody say, well, Russia's going to trot their gold out into a stadium and say, where's yours? I say, yeah, countries do that all the time. Third world countries might do that. But China's not going to roll its gold out into a stadium. Because all you have to say is, okay, let's add up your gold and compare it to how much debt you have, and you don't have enough to cover it. So they're not going to roll their gold out to the stadium and then call the U.S. bluff any more than China's going to stand for delivery on the COMEX. These stories make no sense. They're there to rile you up. They have no basis in reality. You cannot stand for delivery for something that doesn't exist. You won't get it. You won't collapse the COMEX by doing that. But people believe that. You'll see. You'll see. They're going to stand for delivery. They heard it on YouTube. People are going to stand for delivery. All right, let's see what other questions we got here. Pad, I predict Bitcoin will go to 4,200 in the next 2 months. Could be. I try not to make predictions, but that could be a good one. PD, if they had an audit, nobody would believe it because their history of lack of. Well, that's true. So what good would it do to do an audit? Look at Tether. They come out the other day, and people are concerned that there's no dollars backing Tether. Tether is a cryptocurrency that supposedly is backed dollar for dollar by, you got one Tether, you got $1. So the idea there is when you sell your cryptocurrencies, you don't convert into fiat, you just convert into Tether, and it's easier. And then when you want to buy Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ether, whatever it is, you just convert your Tether back into cryptocurrency. A lot of people think it's a sham. So they do not an audit. They have their lawyers present a bank account that shows $2.5 billion. Who has $2.5 billion in a bank? But never mind that. The point is, no one believes it. Or no one that is inclined not to believe it believes it. But everybody else doesn't care. Because the price of Tether is still $1. Which means the participants in the market either don't care or they believe it. Or they don't even know about it. It's the same with COMEX. Once they find out there's no gold in the vault. First of all, there is gold in the vault. Well, maybe there isn't. I don't know. But the numbers they show say there is gold in the vault. But let's say there is none. I don't think the traders care. As long as they can trade their dollars around it, there could be 1 ounce of gold sitting in the vault somewhere. Data DN-based NA. All right. After they run out of more plausible game changers, they move on to physics and remote viewers as reasons to buy now. Always a reason to buy now. Again, create that urgency. There's no point in telling you, realistically, you don't have to buy right now. You might not have to buy at all. Or you have enough already. They're not going to tell you that. Oh, you have 10 ounces of gold? That's fine. No, they got to sell you more. You got to buy more subscriptions. You got to buy more gold. And the reason you have to buy now. You can't buy it in a few weeks, a few months, because there's a game changer that's going to shock the world. On a more serious note, what do you think about Twister and Truth Never Told? He seems more reasonable than the rest. He's very reasonable, other than he's myopic about silver. He just believes silver is it. That's it. That's the only asset. Doesn't even like gold. Silver is it. It's like got history. And everything else is not worth whatever. So very reasonable, very logical, but it's all about silver. Believe me, the world cares that there is no gold in Fort Knox because the rest of the world sees a possibility of gold going up sharply. Okay, you're speaking for knowledge of the rest of the world. So you know that the rest of the world sees a possibility of gold going up sharply. This is the kind of talking, Pat, I don't understand. How do you know the rest of the world sees the possibility of gold going up sharply? Who did you interview? Who did you poll? Where did you get the information that the rest of the world sees this possibility? Just like JP Morgan knows what's coming. Russia is buying gold because they know what's coming. How do you know they know what's coming? What do they know what's coming? What someone on YouTube said, and then 20 other channels repeated. That's what they know. They don't want their gold claimed by the U.S. if that happens. No, there's a difference between what the United States has. Countries repatriate their gold. And it makes sense that they repatriate it. Why would you leave it in the United States? It doesn't make any sense to have it. The only reason they ever sent it to the United States because they were worried that the Germans were going to come and swipe it, or the Russians. In World War II, they were worried the Germans were going to take it, and during the Cold War, they were worried the Russians were going to take it. It's funny, everyone says, but Russia's so prudent. They keep their money, they keep their gold in Russia. They've never sent it out. Yeah, because they were the ones everyone was afraid of taking it. They weren't going to send it out when they were part of the Soviet Union. Russia did lose a lot of gold during World War II. Rob Gibbs, as long as governments agree to honor each other's papers printed out of thin air, it can go on. That's right. See, they count the sovereign debt as assets on their balance sheet. Mario Draghi the other day said, the QE, the printing of the money, this is what we're going to do. This is a part of the toolkit. So whenever they have an issue and somebody's worried about something, they don't have enough money, they can't meet this, we printed the money. We're going to print the money. That's what we do. They don't understand. This is now a commonplace. This is how they work. They want to go further. They don't just want to print the money. They want to print the money and buy everything. They're involved in markets. They've run out of corporate bonds to buy. They don't know what to do. That's probably why they're going to stop QE, because they've run out of corporate bonds to buy in ECB. And now they got their eyes on equities. That's the next thing. The next stock market crash, I guarantee you, right now they're using the Swiss National Bank and a few sovereign wealth funds. They're all over these markets. When you can, this is called running the casino, owning the casino. When you have this ability to print capital, cash, and buy stuff, you can run the market. You run the table. As I mentioned the other night, the CME group has a central bank discount up to 20% for central banks to buy futures and options. Unbelievable. And they take advantage of it, I'm sure. Ops psychics, not physics. Yes, of course. Well, physics too. Who knows? If you can sell gold and silver on physics, they would. DW Pet, I agree. Few would ever trust any report from the U.S. That's right. Few. But the thing is, if you don't trust the U.S., you certainly don't trust China and Sun Tzu accounting. I mean, they flat out lie all the time about their stuff. You can't trust any numbers from anybody when there's big money involved. You just can't. That's the one thing about a blockchain. If everyone can see it, you can't make, if it's immutable and it's actually a real blockchain and no transactions can be coming, you can see what's happening. Otherwise, they tell you whatever they want to tell you. Any numbers coming to Washington close to reality in any category. And the reason for that is governments are political. They're not accountants. They're not there to they're not there to tell you the truth or the facts. They're there to tell you what's in the government's interest. And that may not be what's in your interest. So that's why they change the inflation numbers. That's why they change all the numbers. So why should they have an audit of Fort Knox? What would be the point? People already believe it. The people that need to believe it, believe it. You think Treasury Secretary Munchkin cares what people on Silver Doctors think? He's not worried about them. He's worried about the creditor nations. Not worried about what shows up on YouTube. And remember, they also control the media. So it's not like you're going to see investigative reports, which would go nowhere anyway, on MSNBC, Fox, CNN. None of the mainstream media companies are going to cover anything that would expose. So then you're going to get stories which you can't believe either. And I love when people cite the South China Morning. They cite the Russia TV. Well, they're making up stuff for their country. No different. But people think, well, they're more trustworthy. Why would they be? You just want to believe their story because you think the dollar is toilet paper and they're going to do de-dollarization. Remember, during the Soviet period, the Soviets lied about how many ICBMs they had. They just lied. And what really freaked out the Russians was when Reagan, who was considered adult by all these elite policymakers, he said, I just don't believe they have them. And they're like, well, you don't understand. And he said, I just think if we spend more, well, they won't be able to keep up. And they're like, no, you don't understand how it works. And then when he came out with Star Wars, that really freaked out the Russians because they thought he was serious, and he kind of was when he made that little explanation of how it would work. They knew they couldn't even keep up on the ballistic missiles. There was no way they were going to keep up on trying to figure out how to create new missiles or their own Star Wars shield. So that's the point. No one really knows any of this stuff. We don't know what's in Fort Knox, and there won't be a legitimate order Fort Knox on the Fed, just like the JFK files, not only DC calls it shots. And the thing is, it really doesn't matter whether there's gold in Fort Knox. It does matter who killed President Kennedy, though. It's a completely different type of, you might call it a cover-up, but the world doesn't run on gold. That's when they say you're going to roll the gold out into the stadium. Like, why would they do that? Are they stupid? And what's the point of that? That's not going to make the United States do it. It's not going to make any country do anything. I can people say countries with the gold rule. No, they don't. Kazakhstan would be one of the most powerful countries on earth. It's not. It has a lot of gold. So that's a lot of gold. The old idea that he who has the gold rules is not true. Canada has no gold. United Kingdom runs the city of London, and the United Kingdom has less gold than Kazakhstan. Are you telling me that Kazakhstan rules over the United Kingdom? Look at the immense power that the city of London has. It's bigger than Wall Street. They don't have any gold. These pumpers who push gold and silver, what's in it for them? Why do they push gold and silver? Is there any profit for them? I've never purchased any profit from these people. Well, first of all, you'd have to go, and I'm not going to do it. You'd have to go line by line. First of all, if you just want an audience on YouTube, just repeat the most common gold pumper stories. Talk about dollar collapse, talk about gold backed yuan, talk about running at it, talk about imminent COMEX default, talk about JP Morgan silver, all the stories. You do that, you'll get 5,000, 10,000 followers in no time. People want to hear that story, and they don't just want to hear it once, they want to hear it in as many places as they can. You can start a channel tomorrow and just put out headlines about end of the dollar, end of dollar hegemony, Russia's going to crush the dollar, Russia's buying gold because it knows what's happening, it knows what's coming, China's got more gold, the United States is lying, Fort Knox gold was robbed in 1958 and it's all gone. You write all that stuff, you'll get people. So there's people who do that, not because they make any money, because that's how they can get attention. There's others who sell gold. Companies that sell gold like to have people repeating those stories because that adds to the urgency and that's what people want. And then there's people who actually sell newsletters. They don't just want, for whatever reason, a lot of subscribers, free subscribers on YouTube. They want to make money off of peddling these stories. So they get even more mad. They'll make up stories. What if this and what if that happened and if this happened, then the dollar collapses and then if you stand on your head and you price gold in accordance with cranberries and exchange it for oil and you bring it to Pakistan, and then people pay for that. So there's an incentive everywhere to make up stories. That is for sure. Because when you make up stories or you just repeat stories that you know people like, look what happened when, I like to use the Beatles as an example. Beatles were popular. What happened within 6 months? There were like 40 bands that sounded just like the Beatles. And they all sold. Herman's Hermits, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and all these crappy bands. Some of them were good, but some were crap. And the point is, they all sold because that's what people wanted to hear. I'm psyched at remote viewing. I see what others dream of, Pat. I'm glad you realized that. Game changer, game over. The whole world knows. Database DNA. Early on, I stumbled across Karen News. Yeah, I've ever heard of Raw Entertainment. Deep State is always messing her post up where she's technically, yeah. Now, she says, I don't know if it's true, and just like Bix Weir says that there's gold in the Grand Canyon. I don't know if that's true. He probably doesn't know it's true, but he's read something and done research to lead him to believe that. Now, the thing is, not that he's not right, but the thing is nobody that matters believes him. So it doesn't matter. Same with Karen Hughes. I think she said she's done research. It's the World Bank. She says there's gold in the side of a mountain in the Philippines for humanity. She could be right. I don't know. But the thing is, no one believes that. Doesn't mean she's not right. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm not going to say it's wrong because I haven't been there. I haven't seen it. Maybe she hasn't seen it either. But I can't disprove something like that. Just like I can't disprove there's not a lot of gold in the Grand Canyon. So there's a lot of these people out there. I actually believe, for the most part, they all believe what they're saying. But I think what they believe it to the point of, I think, blind belief. It becomes religion because they need to believe it, they want to believe it, and the people that follow them believe it. And then the thing is, other people repeat what they say, so they're convinced, well, a lot of people are saying this must be true, and therefore I got to believe it too. And then you become addicted to that story, you repeat that story, and it's like Goebbels' propaganda. You repeat it enough, it becomes what people think is true, and that's it. The idea there's no gold in Fort Knox, that's a fact for a lot of people. The idea that COMEX is going to default, fact. All that has to happen is someone has to stand for delivery, and it's game over. The idea that there was going to be a gold back yuan. Mike Maloney did a video calling me out specifically for calling him out, saying there was no basis for that story, and he trotted out a couple of articles that cited no source for the story other than they said it's been reported that China is going to launch a gold back yuan. Now, logically, that's not a source. That's a story saying just because something appears in a newspaper doesn't make it true. You can't assume that they fact-checked it, especially when the story itself, like when it's the same thing when you see in politics every day. Sources say this is going to happen in the Trump campaign. What sources? And then it doesn't happen, and then sources say. That becomes a fact to people. And unfortunately, people believe stuff that they read in the newspaper, even if it's turned out to be false. Newspapers realize it. So do gold and silver pumpers realize They never have to backtrack on a story, and if they do it in a way that is so remote that no one ever hears it. You know, when you get these dramatic stories, you don't even have to use gold and silver pump stories, like gold back to yuan. They either back away from the story, they change the story, or they correct the story, but by then, so many people have heard it and so many people have repeated it that the effect has been made, and they've made their sales from having a story out there, just like the mainstream media. They can make up a story. Well, the classic ones are when they say no one showed up at a Trump rally and there was about 1,000 people there. That's the impression. They want to give everybody who gets that impression. And a few days later, oh yeah, there really were about 6 times the amount of people we said they were. Look, when we get it wrong, we get it wrong. No one remembers that. And that's exactly when it's shoot first and ask question later. If you come up with a good pump story, publish it. See, that's what they do. They publish it. People want to hear it. They want to believe it. It could be true. So there you go. This broadcast could be like sucker support group believing the end is right around the corner. Look, the end could be right around the corner. But the possibility of anything is always out there. But they make you believe whatever story they want you to believe, and it's coupled with an incentive. If you believe that, you're either going to subscribe and or buy what they're selling. And that's the real problem. You have to look, it's the old, who benefits, what is the purpose of the channel, what are they trying to get across, what are they selling, and if you think that went through, and then you look back, what is their track record? Are they always making predictions? Have they repeated this call to action before? And I've seen the COMEX default, and that gets trotted out all the time. But for some people, it's new. And they think, well, I never heard it before. And you just tell them there's no gold left in the COMEX. Someone's going to stand for delivery, and then it's game over. Same with the gold back yuan. Why wouldn't you believe that? Well, it's gold exchangeable on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Well, it's just the petro yuan. You see, that's going to end dollar, Jimmy. The petrodollar's dying. That one's been going on for a long time. Petrodollar's dying. People will tell you it's dead. It's over. Dollar's toast. Dollar's toast. Dollar's toast. Dollar's days number. They know that. They're involved in currency trading. They're not. They have no idea what they're talking about. But they heard somebody with conviction say it on YouTube, and then they heard 20 other channels repeat the same story. Star Wars was a banker's trick. They win again. Monday, buy. Bitcoin is totally anonymous. Tuesday, buy because you can't cheat. Yes, you can't cheat it because it's transparent. Just like lowering rates is good for gold. Rising rates are good for gold. All rates are good for gold. Good news is bad news, and good news is good news, and bad news is news, and news is good. You can't get around any of this stuff. I worked in real estate. Now is the best time to buy a home. Always now is the best time. Now is the best time to sell a home. Never was it a bad time to buy or sell a home. Why? The National Association of Realtors is in the business of supporting realtors who make a living buying and selling homes. They're not going to tell you, I wouldn't buy a house this month. I would wait a couple of years. Why don't you wait a few years? No way. Even if that's exactly what the economy is telling you, wait a couple of years. They're not going to tell you that. It's a good time to buy. Never been a better time to buy a home. The United Kingdom is ruled by the City of London, and so is Canada. Okay, but how much gold do they have? None. Canada has none. You also said there's a species. Yeah, okay. But you know what? Maybe there is. You can mock it and say there aren't. But if there is, so what? I have gremlins living in my basement. Really, I do. They're there. Okay. The rest of the world doesn't care if I have gremlins in my basement, or I have a species of humans with elongated skulls, or I don't have anything like that. Who cares? And that's the point. No one cares about this stuff. I know all I see, and you can't prove I don't. You've never met me. You have not been here. Yes, that is right, Ted. It's always game changer and game over. It's a great story, but don't forget the golden rule. Make a claim that can't be proven true or false. Absolutely. That's exactly the point. Make it so that it's plausible. I saw one headline. It said, the possibility of a COMEX default is guaranteed. That's pretty clever wording. Yeah, the possibility of anything is guaranteed. There's always a possibility of something, so it's guaranteed. But people read that and they say, a COMEX default is guaranteed. And then, therefore, you need to buy your gold or silver now. Tito, thanks for reporting, but you will not get any more subs. I don't care. I don't make any money doing this, so it doesn't really matter. I did this for my own benefit, and I'm happy that some people want to listen. But I know I've done some mock videos. One where I predicted by September 16th, 2016, that gold would be $28,432.16, and silver would be the same price. And I explained why I knew that and about the. And it got like 5,000 views in like 2 hours. If people want to believe that stuff. Who's all right? Yes, it was. All right. Well, we've gone over an hour. I want to thank everyone for listening tonight. Please be sure to join us again tomorrow night at the same time. Any other questions? You can put them in the comments after this is uploaded. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good to hear from you again, Pat. Thanks, everyone.